Brett Lazaridis. There was a lot of discussion by the board around the potential risks and opportunities, but there was a lot of focus on communication policy and the reputation risks that could come from bad press and how best to communicate. I guess if I was in the context of perhaps a climate skeptic or devil's advocate, I'd look at Resolution 6 against Resolution 1 being the policy. One expresses a belief in the long-term systematic risk, but 6 adopts a methodology to measure exposure to climate change risk. Would it be a lower risk and potentially lower cost strategy for the board to conduct 6 first, so to justify all these changes and to actually establish quantitatively what level of risk the fund faces from this issue?
Well, can't we safely assume we're absolutely prosaic as a fund and almost identical in asset allocation to every other fund of our type? I think that's the basis upon which we've been. If you look at our returns, volatility over the years, that's a pretty safe bet. So we're at pretty much where everyone else is at, and we don't need to know what the starting point is. We need to know what difference we can make from here on in, I think, is probably the answer to that. And also, I don't take that resolution as meaning we're going to try and actually find out our share of the total greenhouse emissions made by every company we're invested in across the globe. I don't take it to mean that. I take it to mean, finding a reasonable, practical way of measuring where we're at as a benchmark from which we move forward. And really, we're interested in the degree of movement away from the median rather than the absolute, I think.
Right. I was viewing it to say, well, if you haven't measured your exposure to the risk, why make all these changes before measuring it?
Well, what does it tell you if you find out that you have the same exposure as every other super fund and that on balance you're exposed to a world, or a country in the case of Australia, which has the following level of total out of greenhouse gases? We know that. We know where we're at. We're pretty much invested
in the market,
in the marketplace,
in the public market. So the fact that we're invested across the public market tells us that we are exposed to all the carbon-intensive industries, and that's, you don't have the starting point not to measure it. Because we're in the market, we're part of it.
And I can just add to that by saying that a lot of funds do some assessment work, and I think in our hypothetical situation they will have done that before they come to this meeting. So in practice, you're probably right. But Gary's comment about where we're heading, I think, is, and Frank's comment as well. I don't. People don't necessarily take those steps without checking, I think, is what you're saying. It makes perfect sense. So we have one more question before we'll grab a drink and let those go who need to. But I'd just like to recognise and thank Chris Bryant from Parametric, who's going to have the honour of the last question. Chris sponsored the event today, which has allowed us to film it and have a really good record of it so that we can use and promote this message. So thank you, Chris, for sponsoring the event. We're determined that it gets some recognition from our peers around the world, not just here. So hopefully your money is well spent. So last question to you.
So the pressure is on now. It better be a good question.